Hi everyone, welcome to another Pick and Mix podcast episode, the Leadership Launchpads, and today we are joined by the great Rachel Johnson, and if my face is a little bit red, we have been giggling like small children off camera before we came on, so I can almost guarantee this is going to be a great episode, and thanks so much to Rachel for coming on, because as we'll explain in a moment, I don't know I can't even say whether you work for this organization, but we'll say that. She works for an organization that I have admired from afar, and I'm sure listeners have for a long, long time. And so I'm super excited to hear about her role in it and her increasing role, I think, in it, and all that sort of stuff. So with no further ado, so Rachel Johnson, who is the CEO of PIXL, we'll pass it over to you, really, Rachel. Tell us a bit about your current role in PIXL and maybe a bit about what that means.
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of PIXL, as you say, been around doing that role since 2020. Came into it in rather dramatic circumstances because my father had been the person leading it beforehand. He died very suddenly and had kind of done that very quietly, had a diagnosis, didn't tell anybody. Family knew, but no one else did. So when he died very suddenly, big shock to everybody. Pretty big shock for me, to be fair.
Wow.
We thought he had longer than he actually did have. And so about 3 days after he died, I was asked to lead PIXL. I'd been involved heavily since 2013 and had different roles, but hadn't ever envisaged that would be where I'd end up. But of course, the world changed, our world changed, my world changed, and then the whole world changed. We had the pandemic several months later. So that was a baptism of fire into leadership at this level. Yeah. So that's what I do now. And I have the privilege of leading a team. We work with thousands of schools across the UK primarily. Yeah, love it. I absolutely love it.
Amazing. And the core business of PIXL is what?
So the kind of tagline is to improve life chances and outcomes, but essentially what we do is we work with leaders. So we're a leadership network. We work with leaders to try and equip them around the biggest challenges they face, whatever those challenges might be. So actually what we do now is pretty bespoke in that school leaders can come to us on our new platform about any issue that they're struggling with, including just wanting coaching, wanting someone to talk to, wanting someone just to knock ideas around with. And we're there for them whenever they want to see us, unlimited throughout the year. So it's an absolute privilege. This term, I've seen about 150 leaders, all who've booked in to see me one-on-one, just bring whatever they want to bring to have some time just to talk about things together. So
that's incredible, isn't it? Yeah. And what a modern approach to professional development, really. I mean, I think when I talk to the leaders of PD in my schools, I talk about this idea that, the end of the rainbow is personalized PD.
Yeah.
That's the goal. Yeah. But a lot of things get in the way of that: logistics and finance and capacity.
And time. No time.
Well, time, exactly. So but it sounds like, you're providing a possible solution to that.
And making time. People will turn up for meetings with us on our platform, with all the people on our platform, because they've booked the meeting. Whereas they wouldn't make necessarily an hour for their own time to think. So doing thinking with somebody can sometimes just help people get the answers that are inside them. Yeah. They just don't have time to get them out. And that's where we hope to help. So we do that. We do resources. We have conferences, which you'll know about, and a whole range of other things.
Yeah. And you're an author as well?
Yes, I am. Yeah. That's so funny hearing people say it even now, because as a kid, that's all I wanted to be.
Was it?
Most of my life, people would say, "When's your book coming out?" And it was kind of like a joke.
Really. A joke.
Yeah. And I think people thought I might, write some Jane Austen type novel. Okay. Never really what I'd ever want to write. But it was just such a joke that everyone kept saying that I just didn't ever think it would be serious, really. No. But here we are. So my third book's out literally today. So
how exciting. Yeah. Give us a rundown of the titles.
So the first one is Time to Think, and the second one is Time to Think 2. So the first one is around the things that get us stuck, like people pleasing, boundaries or lack of, not being able to say no, all those kind of basic human things that no one teaches us. So that one covers that.
Yeah.
Second one covers what gets our teams stuck. Okay. So things like buy-in, momentum, introverts and extroverts, and the fact we generally play to the extroverts and don't often really get the best out of the introverts because we don't get the time to think. So those kind of tricky issues. So using all the research that I could find that I thought was helpful from outside of education, leadership thinkers, psychologists, business thinkers.
Yeah, wow, that sounds great.
Yeah, so there's the first two, and then the third one is totally different, and it's really my obsession with quadrants. So I know it's a bit niche, It's a bit niche.
You know,
I love a good quadrant.
me too.
It's just so
I dream of
simple.
making a quadrant.
You've got quadrants in your book. I went to find the quadrants
Did
first.
you? I don't know if they're mine. I might have stolen them. I need my own damn quadrant.
Yeah, I love quadrants. So that book is all about quadrants that help us change the way we live and lead. So whether it's conflict, whether it's energy, whether it's time,
Okay.
whether it's knowing what's important and what's not, whether it's around both and thinking instead of either or thinking, the quadrants kind of unlock a whole other exploration of leadership. So
Yeah.
I've loved writing it, and it's out today. So we'll see.
Well,
We'll see how that goes.
yeah. Well, we'll put all the links to all the stuff in the thing. I mean, to go slightly off topic but on topic, I think that I mean we joke about loving quadrants, but actually I'm not sure that people lean into leadership tools as much as they could do. And if people are, narrating this, oh my God, I haven't got time, I haven't got time, I haven't got this, then those tools can take some of the heavy lifting.
Oh yeah. Yeah, easy and explain things that we don't have
Yeah.
language for. That's why I find tools so helpful,
Yeah.
because you might have a vague idea of what you're trying to do, but until you give it a label, it's difficult to quite explain that to other people or to work out what it is yourself or to repeat it
Yeah.
in other contexts. So I think having a label, having a model is so important. And yeah, I lap up models, just that concept. Can't get enough of it.
And you mentioned earlier that kind of the fact that you looked outside of education for a lot of learning. And I did an episode recently about, how far is your gaze? How far out of yourself are you looking? And I've only literally the last year started looking outside of education, and it is a treasure trove out there.
So many things. I have always found education, and I think I'd find this whatever job I was in, never mind just education, but we can get into a bit of a goldfish bowl.
Yeah.
Where we're all recycling the same things, and then it kind of gets mutated, and then people come out and say, that's not what I meant. And
Yeah.
it's quite a small pool. And although the ideas in there are great and, all for it, I do think sometimes it's refreshing to look at what anyone else is doing in any other industry,
Yeah.
and then the translation piece of how
Yeah.
could that work here. And I think that brings fresh thinking, it brings a different perspective, it helps us see things that perhaps we haven't seen, because the reality is most of us in education have never left school, most of us.
No, that's true.
And so we don't know what's out there. We don't know. We've not been there. We've not seen it. So I think we should be reading about these things because our kids are going into that world.
Yeah.
It's important, I think, for us.
I think so, yeah. And to sort of ramp up the psychological safety by being vulnerable, I embarrassed myself at a recent, they call them dinner parties, don't they? They're never actually dinner parties. A group of old people getting together. And I was talking to someone who's not in education. And I was then suddenly found myself talking about a RACI matrix. You've heard of those? Responsible, accountable, consulted, informed, or something. And I thought it was like the newest thing that I'd found it. And of course, this person in business was like, they were polite enough to wait until the end of my 5-minute monologue, and they went, right, yeah, we use one of, and it was basically
They've seen it years ago, but you never do you? That's
I had no idea.
Go either way. I've been at dinner parties with non-educationalists back in the day, 10 years ago, when we had C, D, B, A grades. And so I was talking, they said, what do you do in your work? And I said, I mainly work with CD borderlines.
Right.
What they heard me say was CD borderlines.
Oh,
I was like, racy quadrant, like it's a kind of a little bit.
My God.
Yeah,
If you put those two together, that would have been amazing.
The conversation, they were like, wow, that must be really challenging. And I was like, yeah, it is sometimes because, they don't want to learn. But they were thinking something completely different. It was only about 35 minutes after the initial conversation when I thought, hang on a second, I don't think we were talking about the same thing. So got to be careful about words that aren't clear in other sectors.
So let's jump into the stuff that you've chosen. So again, new listeners will not know, but we have a kind of a structure to the podcast where Rachel and guests are asked to sort of select things ahead of time to kind of create the content, and they're a mixture of fast friends questions that are sort of aimed to connect us, launch pads for us to learn a little bit, and then kind of ignition points which give us a bit of a lens into the leader behind the leadership. And so the first Fast Friends question that Rachel's picked is, what would constitute a perfect day? So tell us a bit about that.
juicy one, this one, isn't it? So my perfect day would, I mean, I'm going to talk about a whole day, like with extra hours on either side.
Lovely.
So I'm going to get up early and I'm going to go to bed late, which I never do. I go to bed at 9:30. So I'm going to make the most of this day. So the first half of the day, if it was perfect, would involve going for a walk with my husband and my kids, probably going out to a coffee shop, having chats, everyone behaving perfectly, no
Yeah.
arguments between siblings, everyone just saying how great it is to be in this family and how much they love this time with my husband and I. So that would be perfect.
Okay.
And then they'd all be so grateful that we'd bought them lunch and had a coffee, and then we'd come back, and then they would all go and play a game. Without any arguments, they'd play a game with my husband. I, on the other hand, would go for an afternoon bath
Oh, yeah.
with a book, and then I'd do that for probably an hour and a half. And then I would go out for coffee on my own, reading a bit more of my book. And then I'd probably come home and dinner would be made, which actually often is. My husband's amazing like that.
Wow, that's good.
And then we'd all watch a film in the evening, and there wouldn't have been any arguments
Love
for
it.
the entire day.
I love
And then
that.
I would just go to bed feeling happy to be in the
Yeah.
family, happy for the opportunities that we've got. And I would have had some time with them and some time on my own.
Yes.
It's not very revolutionary, is it? But
But
that's
it's not, but
a perfect day.
I think, and that is interesting how, you wanted that balance. And I suppose, throughout the podcast, we'll try to sort of pull out some leadership reflections and stuff as we go through all the stories. And I wonder how much personal time leaders protect for themselves. I mean, does your role even allow you to do that?
I make sure it does. So
Yeah.
we've looked at our calendar next year, our diaries, and the first thing to go into my diary for the whole of the year is focus time. So 2
Right.
sessions of focus time each week, about 3 hours. Across the whole of the month, I make sure that I have 40% of my time at work is focus time. And what I mean by focus time is sitting either at a desk banging out some content because I've just got to sit down and do it, or it might be just wandering around the block until my ideas come, because a lot of the research says that our best ideas do not come in front of a laptop when we're forcing them out. So a lot of thinking that I do and kind of gurgitating it around in my head, that it comes out in those moments of focus time.
Yeah.
But it's been going around my brain for weeks, if not months, sometimes years before it comes out. But I have to have that time. I've learnt the hard way. If I don't have that time, I am not at my best.
Yeah.
When I'm not at my best, so many other people suffer at work and at home that actually I have to do it for myself. I have to. And although at times it feels like I feel I'm being selfish by saying, like I did this week, can I go away for a night on my own? And my kids are going, but mummy, we want you to be here. I'm like, I know, guys, but I need to just have some space on my own so I can come back even better. And they all understand that now. And so I went. But I do that regularly. Like every 3 months, I go away on my own for a night just to sit with myself.
Yeah.
24 hours. It's how I function. So yeah, it's a non-negotiable for me. I have to have that time. I'm an introvert by nature. And so my best thinking happens when I'm often on my own, letting it all come out. So yeah.
That's really interesting. And that's a great message for leaders that are listening who aren't doing that currently, whether you've got capacity within your role to. And I love the fact that you've called it focused time, because that gives a sense of what it's going to be used for. And people know, that's a kind of shared language, isn't it?
Well, it is, and it's important because the words that we use are sometimes really inappropriate. So you think of sixth form students, when they say we've got a free period, we're at pains to say it's not a free period, it's a study period.
Yeah.
The plan is we're labelling it because it's not free, it's there for a purpose. And we don't do that to ourselves, do we? We don't have study periods, we don't have reading hours, we don't have focus time. I do, because I make sure it all goes in.
Yeah.
But I've only got there because I know what happens to me if I don't do that. And when you're a leader, other people the people who are following deserve to be led well.
Right.
And I do not believe that I can lead other people well unless I've had that protected time where I am clear, where I've thought it through, where I know what I think and how I feel, and I process some of the emotions that come with leadership that, if you're not careful, can be leaked all over the people you're leading instead of being dealt with on your own, because the work is you that you have to work on. So I'm really, really adamant that time must be in my diary.
Love it.
So yes, it is.
Wow. That's the first thing I'm doing after this is plugging some focus time.
It's honestly liberating.
Love it. Okay. Well, let's move on to your first kind of ignition point. So again, for new listeners, these are experiences or kind of incidents, I suppose, in people's lives that have had a dramatic impact on them. And the title of yours, which is fascinating, is a post-car accident experience. Wow, tell us about
Yeah.
that.
So the car accident itself, all very dramatic, although that's not the part actually that was the greatest learning. But basically, I crashed my own car very late at night, having just come away from my second date with my now husband.
Right.
And as I was getting out, getting help, another person in another car hit me. So I broke
Wow.
my legs in lots and lots of places and was told I would never walk again. So
Yeah.
that was, a bit of a shocking end to the evening.
Oh,
My parents were in Cambodia building an orphanage at the time.
okay, as you do.
Paul, who's Paul, who's now my husband, who I barely knew, I phoned and said, "I've had this accident. Can you come to the hospital?" So he had to sign down my next of kin, but didn't know any of my details, where I lived, middle name, date of birth, blood type. So that was a bonding experience. So basically, I had 8 hours of surgery. They put metal pins in my legs and basically said, "We think we've saved your legs, but you should be dead. There's no way people survive a car crash like that." I was hit at 45 miles an hour. Yeah, so how my head didn't go through the windscreen, I don't know, and neither did they. They said it's a complete
No.
miracle. So after that, I had to learn how to walk again from scratch with a Zimmer frame. My brain did not know how to make my legs move. Terrifying.
Yeah.
And I was going out with somebody who'd watched me through all of this, but barely knew me. So it was
Yeah.
a very intense experience in my life. But I think that the bit I wanted to talk about today is what I realised in that moment is so much of my identity up until that point, I was 29 when that happened, was around being a teacher. It
Okay.
was so much of my identity that when that car hit me and I couldn't be at work, I didn't know who I was anymore.
Right.
And most people don't have that experience until retirement.
Yeah.
And then the wheels fall off. I had that experience at 29. And I loved everything about teaching. I loved being with the kids. I loved planning. I loved being a head of department. I loved the staff that I worked with. I was in at the holidays if I could be, not because I had to be, but because I just
Yeah.
loved
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But it had taken over my life and there was not much room for anything else. And when the accident happened, I learned some major things about myself.
Yeah.
One, this couldn't be my identity for the rest of my life, and I had to sort that out. Two, if it was my identity and if I was giving it this much effort and attention and time, there was no room for Paul, who just appeared in my life.
Yeah.
So I knew that had to be rebalanced. And thirdly, when you're in that situation, you reevaluate everything. Like, who
Yeah.
are the people who turned up at the hospital? Who really matters? Who really
Right.
gets it? Who is all there in the moment of crisis? And then you never hear from them again.
Yeah.
So I had quite a lot of epiphanies in that, I'd say 3 or 4 months when I was learning how to walk again. And that, I would say that period was so revolutionary for me in my life. It is like there was a before the accident, Rachel,
Yes.
and a post accident, Rachel, because
Yeah.
my priorities and attitude and everything
Whole
changed.
outlook.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm so grateful to be alive. I think that's the other thing. It makes you braver and bolder
Yeah.
when you realise that actually you might not have easily been here at all.
No.
So
And
yeah,
what a weird thing to almost be thankful for the accident.
so thankful. So thankful. The hospital were amazing.
Yeah.
I kept on calling the hospital the hotel, complete slip of the tongue. And people would say, "You were in a hotel?" I mean, no, the hospital. But they were amazing because they put me in a private room. They allowed Paul to visit outside of hours. They put all of the cards, hundreds and hundreds of cards from all of the kids at my secondary school,
Course,
all
yeah.
over the walls. The press had done a big splash in the local paper.
Yeah.
It was a big, big thing. And they
Course
just
so.
treated me brilliantly. And yeah, just a real moment as well of going, I didn't die, but the outpouring of love was almost like I had a funeral before I died, if you
Right.
know what I mean, because people were saying things like, "I've never told you this, but now I realise that I've nearly lost you."
Whoa.
All of that going on, like kids from school in my CD borderline class turning up in reception, demanding to see me, like crazy stuff. But it changed my life forever.
I mean, there's a question and a reflection. The question is, have you had discussions with your husband about whether he thinks the relationship would have continued
So
if it
interesting.
wasn't?
Well, I would say he would say that everything was very intense in that period because
Yeah.
we just met, we got on really well, we thought this had a future, and then next minute I'm like in a hospital bed with my legs hanging from the ceiling,
Right.
my urine next to my bed in a bag.
Yeah, he's seen you at your worst for sure.
You don't want to see someone in that setting. I was so literally broken, physically broken. But what that, of course, does is I had no independence left. I was fiercely independent, fiercely. So I had no independence, couldn't move, couldn't even go to the toilet on my own or wash my hair, couldn't live in my own house that I'd bought. So I was totally stripped of all of that. Couldn't do anything about looking nice, doing your hair. Like I just looked
exactly.
for a week in my pajamas with my legs all bashed. And so you get rid of all of that stuff that you would pretend for ages, and you get straight to the stuff that matters. So I think it's actually been foundational to us.
Of course it has, yeah.
And everything else that we've been through since, it's like, well, it wasn't as bad as that.
Yes. It's like, wow, yeah. I mean, that is incredible. What a way to fall in love, sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, it happened quickly as a result, and it was a year later we got married. So
yeah, which is, well, yeah. That's this is our first meeting. I feel like we're best mates, but the idea that in some hilarious way you're going to return to that when you're at the other end.
Yeah, well, of course. And when we had our kids, my friend was saying, I wonder how it'll be, when they see you in that kind of awful state. And I'm like, not a problem, a problem.
You've ticked that one off already.
Also, in that moment where it was really serious, there was laughter, there was joy, there was all the things that you don't expect to happen when you're told you might never walk again.
Yeah.
And so we found, both of us, an ability to find joy even in the greatest darkness. And that really set us up for the rest of our married life, because once you can go through that and you can still find the humour and you can still find hope, then actually everything else becomes manageable. So it's a real pivotal moment in my life, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and I just, again, pulling some lessons for leaders out there, I suppose, is, and this seems to be a common theme in the episodes, is this idea that the growth is where the challenge is.
Yeah.
And certainly as well, if you're in a team during a challenge and you can together work through that, what's on the other side of that is even more strengths and depth of relationship.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think what's interesting when you look at it from a leadership point of view is Paul and I, in that situation, we were falling in love. We had this whole context around us. So I was actually quite enjoying myself, really, bizarrely. But when I looked at my wider circle, my family, they really struggled with it. They thought I was going to die. They thought I'd never walk again. They were panicking for me and on my behalf. So when in leadership, we might be excited by a challenge because, it's ticking all our boxes. We've always got to be mindful the people around us might not be finding this quite as exciting.
Yes.
And we must never assume they're feeling the same as we are.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. And of course, what also comes to mind is that you can't also assume that people have had as much challenge in their lives as you had, so that they're as ready for it as you are. Oh God, that's fascinating. Well, let's keep going. And so we're going to talk a little bit about your first launchpad. And as normal, I'll flash it up on the screen and talk through sort of what I was thinking when I first created it. And then you can give us a bit of a sense of why, when you flicked through the book, it kind of resonated with you. And this is not linked to the accident, in my mind anyway. But you might,
I might link it.
You might link it. But for those who aren't familiar with this term, this is another one of my, I didn't luckily embarrass myself publicly on this one, but of course I tripped over this and thought, that is absolute genius. And then of course you've only got to read a couple of leadership books from the 50s and this term comes up. It's not particularly new, but the sense that as leaders or as project managers or whatever, sometimes we have to start in kind of like a dark place in order to find the light. And by doing that, if you can imagine the failure of a project, then potentially you give yourself an opportunity to kind of save it. And so this is not by any means an exhaustive description of a pre-mortem or the exact way that you should do it, but in a general sense, the stuff I've been reading suggests that, as a team, you first of all kind of set the scene as an activity. So make sure that you've got all relevant stakeholders involved. So those who, ironically, with the racing matrix are responsible, accountable, need to be informed and need to be consulted. Really explain what the aim of a pre-mortem is and the process, so people can buy into why they need to apply some effort to it. You have to really work hard to create a psychologically safe environment so that people aren't filtering themselves and that they feel safe to kind of, ask questions, to challenge, to suggest ideas. So once you've done that, the suggestion is that the next stage is to sort of imagine why a project or an implementation strategy or something has gone wrong with as much detail as possible as a group, being as creative as possible. And that's where the psychological safety comes in, where people are just chucking all kinds of stuff out there. And then once you've done that, always trying to prioritize those threats or the reasons for failure into some sort of hierarchy of, either how likely they are to happen or how kind of pivotal they would be to the success. And then you play around with this idea of, okay, well, why would those things happen? And of course, this is where you start to think about what could be done to mitigate it. So looking for the contributing factors or any patterns that are happening between all the different things. And then interestingly, and this is something that I've been doing recently with theories of change, I've been surprised by how many assumptions I make. And almost some of them I feel a bit guilty about the assumptions that I'm making. And so now I'm aware that I unconsciously make lots of assumptions. I'm always keen to understand them. And so that's a really interesting part of the process where you're sort of saying, oh, is there anything here that's a blind spot? And of course, that's where having lots of stakeholders involved makes a lot of sense. And then the next bit of the process they talk about is, of course, then trying to think about some solutions. So a bit like, I know that PIXL's a really kind of evidence-informed organization. And so that idea of, whatever solutions get put forward have a strong evidence base, but they're also contextually viable. There's an interesting phrase around, great idea, but what about time, finance, cost, people, and all that stuff? And then going back to that kind of what's now a joke, the racy thing about, okay, well, if we're going to go for this, who's going to be responsible? Who needs to be involved? Who needs to be consulted? And so on and so on. And then the last thing I tripped over while I was kind of researching this was this idea of almost like an agreement. Because if we imagine this could be, I don't know how long these things take. It could be, you might spend a whole day on this. And it's going to be really messy if you do it properly. And so there's something about almost like a bit of it, like I do, I'm sure you do the same at the end of your coaching conversations, saying, okay, let's just take a moment. What's clearer for you now? Let's just make sure we've confirmed what we've learned, confirmed the causes and the solutions, talk about a communication plan. And then, like most things, it's important to not see it as a one-off event. This is the start of a process, much like, implementation itself, but, committing to sort of, okay, well, how are we going to monitor and stuff? So that was kind of what I was thinking when I made it. But why did it resonate with you, Rachel?
Oh, I just love pre-mortems and all the things that come with them. So it's a big staple part of what we talk about at PIXL for school leaders, working out what it is you want to achieve and then working backwards to work out what might stop it happening. I think it's worth kind of picking apart some of the language. What this isn't is a post-mortem. So a post-mortem is when the thing's already dead.
Yes.
And that's what most of us do, I think, in education, or certainly used to, probably 10 years ago. So the results came in, they weren't what we'd hoped. It's happened. There's nothing we can do to change it. Let's kind of grieve over what went wrong.
Yeah.
And pre-mortems are not that. So pre-mortems are when the thing is still alive, whereas obviously post-mortem, the thing is dead. So pre-mortem is when we look forward to next August, imagine it's all gone wrong, and then think to ourselves in that moment, in the room, when someone says, why did this go so wrong? What will we say? And that then gives you all the things that you know already that you haven't addressed that come out so that you change them to make the outcome different. So that's why I love it. I just think it's a really brilliant time travel exercise to get your head into a different place, to see the things that you might not have seen. But the other term that's come out recently, I came across it maybe 18 months ago, is a pre-Victorium, which I love even more. So a pre-Victorium is when you look to success in the future and you basically write the success. I guess in TikTok world, they'd call it manifesting.
Yes.
Maybe it's a bit like that, but leadership. style. So
Yeah.
you look at what the future could be. You might write a press release, which is what we've done at PIXL. Internally, I wrote a press release to be released in 2017, October, and wrote it 2 years ago and gave it to all the staff and said, this is what I want to be true. Now let's work out what needs to happen to make it true,
Yeah.
what will stop that being true, and that essentially leads you into the pre-mortem. So I think it's a tool that can be used everywhere, personally as well as professionally. But I think anything that helps us get out of our own heads
Yep.
and get out of the moment that we're currently in,
Yeah.
helps give us clarity. And for me, a pre-mortem and a pre-victorium help you get out your own head.
Oh, I love that. Well, I mean, as I said before, we're going to try and also, put a few challenges out to leaders as we go through the podcast. And, if you haven't done a pre-mortem, get involved in that. And if you haven't thought about what success looks like and committed it to paper, and even distributed that, like you said, that with that press release sounds like a great idea.
It's really powerful as well because you can see what it looks like. So anything done looks like is what Brené Brown says.
Yeah.
Coaching, you have the magic question. If everything was fixed tonight when you were asleep and you woke up in the morning, it was all sorted, whatever it is, what would it look like? Anything that you can ask, including what are you ignoring now that you're going to find out in 6 months' time?
Yeah.
Like, we know these things.
Yeah.
It's not that we don't know them. We just are so loath to address them sometimes that we just need to put ourselves in a place where we don't ignore them any longer.
Yeah.
It's about facing the brutal facts. It's all of that bit, isn't it? Brutal facts, hope, pre-mortem. It's all part of the same suite of tools, I think, that help us get there.
Amazing. All right. Well, we're going to move on to your next fast friends question, which was, what do you value most in a friendship? So tell us a bit about that.
Again, I've been on a bit of a journey with this, I think. So I was brought up, no one told me this. This is just what I kind of gathered from my upbringing. Like, we all just pick things up because we can work out. No one's ever told us this. But I was brought up believing, or believed when I was little, that it was all about being a good friend to other people. And don't be needy. Don't ask for what you need. It's what other people need. So serve others, be there for others, which essentially has been the kind of storyline of my entire life and still is to some extent. But round about this accident that I mentioned earlier, I actually realised, hang on a second, I can't be there for everybody now. All these people are taking and I'm giving, and they're taking more than I've got to give, but I'm still giving it anyway. But it's got to stop now because I'm really ill and I need to recover. Then 8 months later, when I started walking again, went back to school, and then got glandular fever. Devastated. I was just completely wiped out from all of the stuff that happened with my injuries. And I had, I guess, what I would call a fairly significant cull of the people in my life, in that I was very, very definite about, I've got to write down all of the people that I'm involved in, hundreds of them. And I've got to work out who are the people that I want to be friends with because they give to me and I give to them and it's mutual. And who are the people who actually, they're not there for me. They can't be, for whatever reason. I will still help them. I'll still be there for them. But it's not mutual. We're not in tune. We're not in sync. And so I became very deliberate at that age, 29, that from now on, I would have very important people in my life. I'd have all the other people too, of course, but I would protect myself and I would have a number of people who I call very important people, who inspire me, who challenge me, who don't agree with me, who will tell me the truth in love, but always tell me the truth, who are there for me through thick and thin, and I'm there for them too. And so that I had these people in my life already, but of course, what happens when you are a giver and a people pleaser, as I was, is that the people who I really loved spending time with, I didn't spend any time with because I was always too busy with all these people.
Of course.
Who I found draining.
Yeah.
So I flipped the narrative on that and made sure that I made time in my life for the people in my life who make me a better person, who challenge me, who will tell me the truth. And so those are the things now that I really value. And I've got friends of 35 years, 40 years, who've been that for me since I was 8 in one case, and 22 in another. And they've been there through everything. And I've gathered more as I've got into this role, because you need different people at different times. But I have become very deliberate about spending time with friends because it's mutually beneficial. And I'm a better person of me.
It's almost like an inner circle and an outer circle.
Yeah. That's exactly how it is. And I think that is the thing, isn't it? The inner circle, that's kind of like your chosen board, the people who've earned their seats, who you know you can trust. And then you've got the masses, and the masses are really important. And I want to work with the masses, and I want to have conversations. I want to invest. I want to serve. But I think where the difference for me happened at 29 was that I'm not any longer going to serve to the detriment of myself.
Yes.
That's the difference. And as a people pleaser, I just gave of myself until I was tonsillitis bound in bed or knocked over or too tired to do anything. And that isn't healthy. And so I've really had to work on my boundaries about I will give, but I, in my emotional bank account, I must not be overdrawn.
Yes.
And if I find myself overdrawn, I know I'm in trouble. And then everyone else will be in trouble because my leadership will go wonky. And so it is a really important thing.
Well, that links back to what you were saying earlier about, with your children and the focus time, isn't it? I know that if I don't do this, I'm no good for other people.
Yeah. And worse, what happens is we get resentful. And so I found recently, I can't remember where I read it, so I can't quote who said it, but where I read it was basically, they said, resentment is the feeling we have when our boundaries have been crossed.
Right.
And I thought, you know what, that is absolutely right. If I feel resentful that I've not had any time on my own, it's because I've not put it in my diary. Exactly. I can't be resentful for them for taking my time when I've given it.
Yeah.
This is about controlling ourselves, I think. And
it is, yeah. And there's also something I think you've spoken well about this idea that you can't assume people know what your boundaries are.
No, of course. How would they know? And this is what humans do, isn't it? We play guess how I'm in a mood, guess why I'm in a mood. I'll say no words, and because you love me, I will assume that you read my mind.
If he doesn't understand, you don't love me.
They've got no chance at all.
Yeah.
You can't communicate through anything other than words, actually. Tears, we'll come to that, but you can communicate in tears, but ultimately it is unfair for any human to ask another human to work out what you're thinking without ever explaining it. And you need a special group of people who are there, who are in the mess with you, who see you messy, and are staying even though you're messy. And I think that is such a gift.
Right, well, I'm writing down a new goal for me. Make it into Rachel's inner circle. It'll be my life goal now. But also, that's fascinating. Again, another challenge to people, leaders that are listening to this, around: are you as a leader clear about your boundaries? Are other people clear about your boundaries? And what are you doing to protect yourself so that you can be the best for others?
Yeah.
I guess those are some...
saying I need. Like I don't know many leaders who are willing to say I need, and then whatever comes next, because I can't say that, it's selfish. People will think I'm this, that, and the other. Actually, we know what we need, and if we don't express it, we just get resentful, and resentment is even worse.
Well, that's really, I mean, again, the danger is to turn the camera on me, but I've been recently, I've got a great relationship with my line manager, because, almost like a friendship, and I feel really psychologically safe enough to say stuff to her. And, and I've said to her, because on the surface, I've got a full-time job leading PD and teaching and learning across 35 schools. And so where does this leadership launchpad stuff come into that? And I've kind of I hear myself saying to her, I need a creative outlet.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm almost scratching that itch.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, I totally understand it. Please, go forward and all that. And
everyone benefits, right, from that. Everyone benefits from you having your need met.
Well, my wife does have to hear about every damn launchpad. So I don't think she would.
That makes date nights better than just organising the childcare calendar, right? You actually have something to talk about. So win-win.
Right. There we go. All right. So we're going to move on to your next ignition point. And this is about a school trip to London. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So when I started my first teaching job as an English teacher in Stockton, northeast of England, miles away from London, and I said to my head of department, I want to organise a trip to London with 40 year 11s to go and see. I think it was Romeo and Juliet, the musical at the time. And ridiculous thing to ask. I think I'd only been there a year. And was asking if I could take 40 kids on a trip that had never been done before. I mean, what do I know about organising trips? It's ridiculous. And Shirley said, okay, then yeah. And so I organised this trip. It became one of many, many trips I organised to London with these kids. Like really life-changing trips. They'd never been out of the local area.
Ah,
But why that was an ignition point to me really is when I look, it was an ignition point at the time because I thought, wow, you trust me, you believe in
yeah,
me, you back me, you're allowing me to do the thing that I love more than anything, which is taking these young people and giving them experiences that they'll remember for the rest of their lives. And you're backing me, you're excited about it, you're totally buying into what I'm doing. And I
yeah,
didn't really deserve any of that. I was like 22.
yeah,
You know, it's a big risk and a big, well, a big risk for everybody really. But she let me do it and continued to let me do it. And I think now I look back, I just think how privileged that I started my career in an environment where the head of English, the head backed me to a point where they let me take real risks. At no point did I feel that anybody was panicking. At no point did I think they were talking behind my back going, she's a nutter.
yeah.
What?
So it'll never
They
work.
absolutely believed I could do it. And because they believed I could do it, I believed I could do
Yes,
it. And I was braver and bolder and safer as a result. And I'm just so grateful that I started my career there because I'm not sure if every school would have taken those risks. And they really, really did. And lots more besides. And so when in that school, I became head of English eventually, and then had my car accident. When I came back to that, I had all of that. Again, the emotional bank account was
yeah,
full because I'd been brought up in my career in a place that had been challenging because it wasn't just easy, you know, I was challenged about lots of things, but was brilliant for my growth. And I'm so grateful. That's where I started. It's really been pivotal to where I've ended up.
yeah. Wow. I mean, I can definitely draw a parallel, and I seem to talk about this guy all the time, David Carter, who was my head when I was an NQT. So he gave me my first job, and then he was my head then for the next 10, 12 years. So I
Amazing.
just grew up, so
Yeah.
to speak, in that environment. I knew no different than somebody having complete faith in me.
Yeah.
And he used to just, like, flippantly, not flippantly, but now I say it flippantly, on a regular basis, it would be, Chris, I think I want to do this. Fancy leading that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And as
Just
a
the
young,
trust involved in that sentence,
just like,
the trust and the belief and the
okay,
agency. Yeah.
and I was just thinking then, again, visually, always thinking visually about, if we think about someone's career trajectory, that initial period probably sets the tone for the rest of the
Oh,
graph.
well, it certainly set the tone for how I led,
Yeah,
because
for me
when I led
too.
who wanted to take risks, I was willing to give them a
Yeah,
chance because someone had taken a chance on me, and it is a straightforward situation, isn't it? It becomes part of your leadership DNA. And
yeah,
I've had experiences that are also part of my DNA that are not good, but
exactly.
I've looked at those and gone, "I'll never do that,"
Sure.
because it was so damaging. But in that school, I had none of that. It was
No.
just brilliant, and I loved it.
And again, another theme which comes through in this podcast is the frightening responsibility that leaders have on the development of those below them, like on
Yeah.
a day-to-day basis. And again, if we're talking about books, my self-efficacy leadership book comes out soon, and there's a chapter in there around kind of, about the impact that leaders have on either the construction or destruction of people's
Oh,
confidence below
huge,
them.
huge.
Wow, fascinating. Okay. So let's move on to the second launchpad, which I think is really fascinating, certainly for organizations that are growing, like yourselves and, the trust that I'm in. And so I'll get the slide up, but effectively, this one comes off the back of, we had the privilege of having Owen Eastwood come to
Yeah.
our trust.
Oh, yeah. Wrote a brilliant book on belonging.
Incredible Belonging, the name of the book, if people haven't got to it. And just like, wow. And for lots of us at that time, it was the first time we'd kind of heard that phrase, really. And so I started, thinking afterwards around, because the conversations that happened post conference, for weeks and months were about belonging. And you hear some people, not saying that they feel a great sense of belonging. And you think to yourself, oh, well, I do. And we're in the same organization. How is that? And so I started thinking about this idea of, we experience different levels of belonging, and we probably feel it differently at different times in our lives and all that sort of stuff. But there is There is, and so, I mean, it happened. I think I work for a great organisation, but even in there are people that do use those phrases. Well, they want us to do this, and I think it is quite common, I suppose, in organisations where senior leadership are seen as something different. There's a barrier between the workers and the leaders or whatever, and people refer to them as they rather than we. And so I started playing around that idea of, if you were to put, layers of an organization, in this instance, in an educational organization, at what point does the we kind of stop? In a group, do they talk about we? In an English department, do they talk about we? In a humanities faculty, do they still hold on to that we as the humanities faculty? Can you get people to still be saying we at a school level? And then, of course, if you've got a multi-academy trust or a large organization like PIXL, can you get everybody on board and feeling like, it's a we thing? So I guess I started playing around with some of the barriers, and these again are just, straight out of my head, around what might stop people from feeling like that. And if you're listening, I'll read down them quickly. But misaligned purpose, misaligned values, discrimination, lack of collaboration, connection, recognition, lack of support, agency, psychological safety, and trust. And I think potentially, there's definitely something about connection that we know that if you don't feel connected, or accepted or valued and all those things, you struggle to kind of get involved. But I also think that as leaders, we've got a responsibility, a bit like what we said earlier, of communicating really well. We can't assume that people will get the vision or get the values or get the ethos. It's not a given that you say it once or you stick it on Brene Brown always makes me laugh when she talks about, those plaques that people have in their foyers of their offices with big words on it, that don't never get operationalized. But it's not good enough just to write it down, is it? And then I then played around with the obvious thing of thinking about, okay, well, how could leaders potentially do stuff? And this idea of humanized recruitment, I meant like really lean into the person during recruitment and induction. Don't there are operational elements to it, like here's your photocopying code, here's this, here's that, but make them feel welcome and hear their story and stuff like that. Obviously things like values and goals alignment, open communication, in that people are always given this, I guess, honesty. I think a coaching approach, anytime you can create a feeling of partnership in anything, you welcome people more in, don't you? They feel like it's being done with, not done to. That's interesting. I think most people, if they feel invested in, then they feel more of a part of the organisation. And then things that we talked about earlier, kind of small little praise and rewards and stuff like that. And I don't think, we're not sadly in a financial climate that supports a lot of social activities in schools. But for us old people who remember a healthier time financially, there used to be, we joke about it now, but loads of us used to work at this John Cabot Academy with Sir David, and we'd have a Christmas party once a year, and we didn't know it at the time, but like that party gave us the energy to do a whole year. And I've never been able to ask David about whether or not whether he knew and he was doing that on purpose. I'll give him a Christmas party and then I get a year's worth of stuff out of them, which is interesting. Anyway, that was what I was thinking when I did it, but why did it resonate with you, Rachel?
Well, I think belonging is such an important topic. We've been talking about it probably for about 2.5 years. And what is really interesting in the work we do at PIXL is often, because I'm looking outside of education, I come across these things before they become mainstream.
Right.
As we start mentioning it. And in meetings, you can see people like, what? Within like 2 years, everybody's talking about
course.
it. And that I think is the beauty of thought leadership, isn't it? Of just bringing in ideas and saying, let's think about this. So I think belonging is really important. I think the we part is crucial, but in every we part, there's also a me part. And so Mark Buckingham talks about the dynamic between we and me.
Okay.
And so if we believe in these things, what does it mean for me? And if
Right.
people are not clear about what it means for me, then they're not invested in the we.
Yes.
So I think that's really interesting. So it might be that we are very clear as a trust or as a school what we stand for, what we want, but what does that mean for each individual person? So I think that's kind of one thing. The second thing is there's a difference between belonging and fitting in.
Yes.
And I worry now that people are getting the two mixed up. So belonging is when you can be your full fat self in a context, professional, of course, but you don't have to try and fit in. You fit in, you belong. Whereas fitting in is when we have to change elements of ourselves and our practice in order to be accepted. And so I think there is a difference, and I think there is an interesting conversation around true belonging. What does true belonging actually look like? It doesn't necessarily mean conformity. It means that you are fit, you fit, and you're one of us, even if you are different, especially if you're different. And I'm just not sure if we have nailed that yet. And I think that's an interesting concept to discuss, as are all of the bits of research now that are very clear about connection, belonging, the impact, not just on outcomes, which there is, but even more significant on life chances. Literally, how long you survive after a heart attack or stroke is dependent on your friendship group and your society connections. So this is stuff we've got to take seriously.
Yeah.
And coming out of the US, there's all these different studies on compassionomics, for example, the art of compassion in a medical setting. When a consultant spends 40 seconds a day talking to a patient, 40 seconds, it makes a tangible difference on their expected rates of recovery, including cancer survival rates, diabetes becoming under control, like crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So that, just think about that. If we get on top of that in the NHS, it would save us billions.
Oh my goodness.
And all it actually requires is having a community as well as a medical diagnosis, both together. And I just don't know if we take it, we talk about it now, it's a word that's banged around, all the time. But do we really understand what it is, how we do it, what it isn't? I think belonging is around asking people's opinion, taking it seriously, spending time listening, actually coming from a position of saying just because at leadership level we are nailed on with what we're doing does not mean everybody else is. And belonging is not just teaching staff. Belonging is everybody on the site, including kids and parents and caretaking staff and dinner staff. Like, do they all feel they belong? Do we all feel an investment in this thing or not?
Yeah.
And if so, why not? And I think that these are powerful questions that we ignore at our peril, really.
Yeah. And you're right. Yeah. I mean, there's so much stuff bouncing around my head now. Try and get it out in order. But that first one being, I guess, the call to action for people off the back of the infographic is, where do you think your level of we is, and why is it, and what could you do about it? But the other things that you said I think are fascinating is, I think, ignore at your peril the need for people to have what's in it for me.
Yeah, they must. There's got to be
You
what's in
can't
it.
ignore that.
No, so that the values of the trust or the school might look great. I'm happy for you. They look amazing. But if it means when my daughter's in hospital and I have to take an unpaid day's leave, I don't feel like I belong anymore.
Yeah.
If there's any kind of friction and I can't address it in a way that is open and psychologically safe, which you've mentioned a couple of times, then I don't belong at all. I'm just pretending. So we can't play a great big game of let's pretend. Either we have to do it and mean it, or we might be better not dabbling.
Yeah.
False.
Well, and again, you set yourself up for a fall if at the top level you talk all about belonging, and then people go and dig a little bit deeper and nobody feels that at the bottom. You're better off not doing it in the first place.
Yeah. And what does actually belonging mean? And again, it's very closely linked with psychological safety. Belonging does not mean that we're going to be best friends for the rest of our lives. Belonging does not mean that I can't challenge you and you can't challenge me. Belonging doesn't mean it's cozy. Belonging, we can belong and have brutally honest conversations, and so we should. But real belonging is, I'm invested, I care, we are better together, I want to listen to what you've got to say, we're invested, mutually invested. I don't see you as a commodity to be wiped away when you're inconvenient. I think there's a lot for humans to learn about this area because it is such an integral part of who we are. And in the society we're currently living in, there is false connection and false belonging everywhere. And our kids are finding it on TikTok, on
Yeah.
Snapchat, in places where there is no real belonging.
No, it's not.
It's pretend belonging. And we are the only places left in schools where we can bring kids together from different backgrounds in one place under our roof and help them feel something that's more powerful and more real than that.
Yeah.
Are we? Is the question and challenge I would give. Are we? Is it better to be in your school than to be running county lines with the gang who make you feel like you're $1 million?
Yeah.
Are we doing a better job than that? Because
Amazing.
we know for many young people we're not, and they're going there and not staying here. And it's tragic.
It is really challenging, isn't it? I'm going to have to think a bit more about that. Okay, well, we've reached the end and we've got your last question. And this one you've chose, which is interesting. It says, when did you last cry in front of another person?
I cry all the time. It's just not the kind of sobbing out of control tears that people might think when you think about crying. So I think, first of all, before I talk about when I cried, which is usually at the cinema or in a speech where I'm really moved to tears, kind of what I believe about crying, I think is important. So I believe that crying is a form of words that is expressed in a way that isn't a word.
Nice.
So it's a leaking of emotions that have pent up inside me so much that for whatever reason, I can't get words out to explain it. And the only way of kind of the valve unleashing,
I love this.
get those tears out. So I think tears are precious. I think tears are a form of expression that is almost deeper than words. When you choose, or sometimes you don't choose, it just happens, to show that level of vulnerability and that level of emotion in front of another person, that is precious. And so I cry for all kinds of reasons. I cry when I have to make difficult decisions and tell someone it's difficult, and I see their reaction and I find it difficult. So I sometimes cry.
Yeah.
I cry even more when I've done the difficult thing and the person opposite me says how grateful they are for the kindness, the way they've been treated. That sets me off. Because I think anything where I see what I want most in life and my values land with people who see that they've been treated with those values and acknowledge it, something inside me happens that I can't even explain. I literally can't explain it. It comes out because I'm so moved. It comes out in tears. So I cry all the time in front of my kids in terms of being, moved in a film. They will laugh at me that I'm sobbing at the end of Bridget Jones or sobbing at the end of Snow White. Anything really. Music sets me off, but I think that is such a gift because how I see it is that I have lots of different ways of expressing my emotion, sometimes in words. Actually, tears are another form of explaining that. But I've never been uncomfortable about tears, but I've had to do a lot of work with other people who don't handle it sometimes well. Because they're like, oh my goodness, what is this? And so it's, I say to people, if I'm doing this in front of you, then I feel safe to show this level of emotion, and that's a gift, really. So
I think you're right.
I think tears are precious.
That's fascinating, isn't it? And I think my kids laugh at me because I've got no problems crying. And it's interesting that you talk about its connection to emotion because I definitely recognise I cry the most through pride.
Yeah. It's
I don't
not
really
always
get sad.
Yeah.
If I certainly, I don't think I'd cry if I saw a dead animal or something like that. But I can't watch this sounds ridiculous, but if I watch X Factor, American Idol, or anything like that,
stories,
you see people's lives change right in front of you, and you think,
yeah, and I think that's why tears are so important, really. I think what resonates is when you feel like you're deeply humbled by something, or you feel really proud, or really grateful, or really moved. It's all those wonderful emotions that I don't know how else they come out other than that, really.
But also, what you said, I wonder whether we should spend some time when we catch ourselves crying. We should reflect on the fact that, oh, wow, that's an outpouring. That's a physical symptom of an emotion. What am I feeling here?
Exactly that. And then sometimes just letting yourself feel it. So
Yeah.
I read when both my parents died very quickly, within 2 years of each other. So both utterly terrible circumstances,
Wow.
very rapidly. So like complete head wrecker. And I'd find myself crying and think, oh my goodness, why am I crying? Am I crying because I miss them? Am I crying because I'm sad for me? Am I sad for my kids? I could have come up with 25 reasons why I was crying. And everybody else who might have seen me would have all assumed you're missing your parents.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily that. It was that I was missing what they could give to my kids. I was missing what my kids wouldn't now have. I was missing the life that we'd imagined that we now wouldn't have.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
of those things. And that combination, that cocktail of emotions, you can't explain that in a rational way. So it comes out in tears.
Yeah.
But it's therapeutic and it's helpful. And sometimes you just have to, set yourself a timer, give yourself a good cry, and then go, right, that feels better now. I've released it. And so, I use tears like that as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned we're getting to the end now, but I'm fascinated by this. That idea that other people don't sometimes know how to respond in front of you when you're crying, and I'm just reflecting then about how if we're suggesting that it's a signal of emotion, it's almost a door, an open door for that leader to say, "Wow, that seems like it's affected you emotionally. Tell me more about that."
Yeah. Rather than ignoring it.
Yeah.
Or carrying on talking through it.
Yeah.
Or just kind of giving tissues and not
Or running out, but yeah.
it. So I think all those questions, sometimes silence is the right thing to allow emotion to be processed, because while you're crying, your brain is still working.
Yeah.
Your words can't come out. So you're processing, aren't you, when you're doing that? And sometimes silence is best. Sometimes just a touch on the arm. Got to be careful when you do that, of course.
Sure.
But, just that kind of, I'm here, I'm holding this space. It's okay.
Yes.
Where we feel awkward as humans when other people are crying is we feel the need to fill the void. Like, I must say something. They're upset. Have I said something? Is it me?
Yeah.
It's all about us. I'm like, just stop.
Yeah.
There's a moment happening. Allow it to happen. Ask them what they need. Ask them what would be helpful. Don't try and fill it or fix it or sort it or just excuse it or silence it or polite it away. Like at a basic human level, let's just sit with people in that emotion and let people do it. And I think what a gift that is to give people.
Yeah. Well, that's a great place to finish. Tell us a bit more about, or remind us how people can connect with the books and with PIXL in more general.
Well, you can go on Amazon and see all the books, or through the John Catt Bookshop, where if you have a discount code, which I know are knocking around, you can get 20% off, and there's those 3 books. I also have 2 podcasts, PIXL Pearls, 10 minutes of leadership reflection, and then the PIXL Leadership Book Club, where we take non-educational leadership books, have 2 school leaders talk about how they have implemented those ideas in schools. So they're really popular, and there's some really, really great books that we've covered.
Yeah, that sounds great.
I'm on all this. Well, I'm on all the socials. I'm not quite on all the socials. I don't do anything modern like TikTok or anything. But I'm on LinkedIn and X, so where people can connect there. But also, I always give people my email address, which is rjohnson@pixl.org.uk. If I can ever be of any help, I'd love to hear from people.
Amazing. Well, if you've enjoyed the podcast and the Leadership Launchpad aspects, then connect with the book, connect with me, and we'd love to see you on another episode. So thanks for listening.